Hi guys, Asia this side and welcome to my channel. A channel where I make videos for those of you who want to realize their Canadian dreams, and I also make vlogs about life in Canada. So if you are new to my channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that whenever I load a new video, you're the first ones to know. Cheers. Immigration is a hot topic these days. People are moving from their home countries to better countries for a better future. Two countries come in your mind when you talk about immigration these days, as they are the most popular ones. The one is Australia, the second one is Canada. So which country is right for you? I'm going to help you make this decision. Let's go. Hi guys, as you can see I'm indoors now. It was getting chilly outside, so I just came indoors. This is what happens in Canada. I'll talk about it later on. So both Canada and Australia offer a good standard of living. So where does the difference lie? Now let's talk about their immigration systems. Both Canada and Australia have popular immigration systems. In Canada it's called the Express Entry, and in Australia it's called the Subclass 189. Now digging deeper into the immigration process, you have to see which demand list of occupations do you fall under, whether it's under Canada or it's under Australia. Both have different demand lists for occupations. Now, if you qualify for both, then that's great. But if you qualify for one out of the other, you know which country you have to apply for. Now, when you apply for these programs under the demand list, both are calculated differently. In Australia, you have to have a qualification and you have to have the work experience similar to that qualification. Only then you get points. Whereas in Canada, if you have a different work experience and you have a different qualification, you still get points. Now, the second point I would like to mention is you have to have a minimum of 3 years of work experience before you can apply for that demand list occupation in Australia. But in Canada, you only need 1 year of work experience. In Australia, to apply for a PR is much more costly as in Canada. So to apply for a PR in Australia for a couple and their child is going to cost you around $6,400. And similarly for a couple and a child to apply for a PR in Canada is going to cost you just $2,200. Now the next point, or I would say one of the important points, is after you receive your invitation to apply, there's a difference in the timeline for getting your PR. In Australia, it takes about 11 to 15 months, and in Canada, it takes about 6 months to get your PR. Now let's talk about citizenship. In Australia, you can apply for a citizenship after a continuous stay of 4 years, whereas in Canada, you can apply for a citizenship after a continuous stay of 3 years. So we can conclude that if you're in Canada, you can get a citizenship earlier. Another point I would like to mention is the cost of living. The cost of living is a little higher in Australia as compared to the cost of living in Canada. Now, we also have to understand that the minimum wages in Australia is 18.93, approximately $19 an hour, whereas the minimum wage in Canada is $14 an hour. So that compensates for the cost of living. The work-life balance is also different in these two countries. In Australia, you get a mandatory paid leave of 4 weeks, whereas in Canada, it's only 2 weeks. So we can see that Australia gives you more benefit in terms of leaves. Now let's talk about taxes. First, I'm going to talk about income tax on an annual basis. In Australia, if you're making $18,200, the first $18,200, there's no tax. After that, you're charged a tax of 9.65%, and it goes up depending on the amount of income you make. Whereas in Canada, there are two types of taxes: federal tax, provincial tax. So even if you make a single dollar, you're charged federal tax of 15% and a provincial tax of 5%. So for the first for $42,200, you're charged 20% tax. Now let's talk about VAT. That's value added tax. In Australia, the VAT is 10%. So if you're buying something, let's say for $2, that 10% is included in the $2. So that's the amount of VAT that they charge. Whereas in Canada, if you want to buy something for $2, there is an extra VAT of 13% that is charged above the $2. So you have to pay more in Canada in terms of taxes. Now the next point I would like to talk about is insurance. Insurance is important in both these countries. The insurance in Canada is very, very expensive as compared to insurance in Australia. Whether I'm talking about car insurance, whether I'm talking about health insurance, or whether I'm talking about insurance in general. So let me take an example and explain. The amount of dollars you pay for car insurance per month in Canada is approximately equal to the amount of car insurance you pay for a full year in Australia. So this is a big point, a big difference. Insurance is expensive in Canada. Let's talk about the healthcare system now. In Australia, the healthcare system is public as well as private, whereas in Canada, it is a public healthcare system. So what does that mean? The healthcare system in Australia is much more efficient, so there are less of wait times, whereas in Canada, the healthcare system is not that efficient, so you have a longer wait time. Now let's see the unemployment rate of both the countries. In Australia, the unemployment rate is 4.9%, whereas in Canada, it is higher, it is 5.7%. Now let's talk about Social Security. When I mean Social Security, I say unemployment benefits, sickness, and etc. So in Australia, you're eligible for Social Security after completing 2 years, whereas in Canada, you're eligible for Social Security immediately. Now we are going to talk about the biggest difference, and that is the weather. As we know, Canada is a cold country and Australia is a warm country. In Canada, we get all 4 seasons, so it is in Australia. But in Canada, it's a cold country, so you get more of the winter weather. So 6 to 7 months are pretty cold in Canada. And when it gets cold, it gets extremely cold, that the temperature falls down to minus 40 degrees Celsius. So it gets that cold. Whereas in Australia, it's only that you get a little harsh summers and the sun is pretty bright and the temperature goes up to 37 to 40 degrees in the summers. So you have to decide, if you're a person who doesn't like the cold, Australia is for you. And if you're a person who is okay with the cold weather, then Canada is also good for you. So guys, one thing more I would like to mention is that if you have relatives in or friends in either of those countries, you should choose, or it's better you choose that country, because when you go to that country, they really help you in your initial settlement, and that is a big factor. So guys, we have discussed the major points about Canada and Australia. On one hand, it is easier to get immigration to Canada, but on the other hand, the weather conditions may be a deciding factor. So it is your individual preference which country you want to choose. I would really appreciate if you would comment in the comment section below which country you have chosen. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Cheers.